Who out there has one of these Tomy sets but the power unit fails to work? This video will look into little problems that I found which can happen to these little power units and stop the toy from functioning properly. All the fun of this toy relies on one very important piece, which under extended use can easily fall victim to a variety of different problems. Because this is an instructional video, here's that very boring title. I was given two of the Thomas loader sets, and of course it gave me the opportunity to see these units. And unfortunately, when I was given these sets, these drive units did have some problems, and let's open it up and I'll show you what was wrong with them, because it might help you fix yours. And because I was given two sets, being the big loader and the big loader, I was able to look at one versus the other and see what was going on and what needed to be rectified in the one which didn't work. This unit here had a very lazy gear here, and I had to open up this one to see which part of the mechanism wasn't working to make that gear inoperative in the really important parts where it's used in the sets. And before I open this one up, one of the first things I noticed was when I turned it on, it had like a labouring sound, as if it was fighting against something inside. It was actually pretty easy to fix this problem. What I found the problem was that these two wheels had pressed together and they were too tight, and I just eased them out a bit with a screwdriver, carefully of course, and I was able to rectify this tightness that was going on. And I'm being very careful in the way I pull the wheels back out. When I turn them on now, it should sound a bit different. That labouring sound has gone away. And I'll open it up and I'll show you some other things that I noticed going on inside these. And this really isn't complex, it's actually pretty well designed. I like the way it's laid out. And like I said, either take a sketch or a photograph of something before you start digging around, so you remember how to put it back together. One of the first things I noticed, there was a lot of hair, pet hair and hair from carpets and stuff. It was all around the shafts, all caught around cogs. And even now as I turn that, you can still see there's more hair in there. It just keeps coming out of nooks and crannies. So the more hair and stuff and muck that gets caught up in these little toys, the harder it is for the toy to work properly. What I found was the center shaft can just come out. It's all holeless bolus all by itself. And even around these components, you're going to find hair, all matted up on shafts and stopping the toy from working properly. Now remembering, I'm trying to work out why this gear isn't working correctly, and I found that this whole unit can lift out as one. It's sort of funny, I kept seeing fluff in here. It's all over the place. Anyway, underneath that bundle of gears lays this very important piece, and the only way to get to it is you've got to obviously take bits and pieces out. Now what I found happening was this cog here wasn't keyed into the shaft, it was actually spinning on the shaft, so the power that was being delivered onto this shaft wasn't being transferred onto this cog, which actually cogs into the wheel. If I strangely go back a step, you can see how that cog at the bottom there has a relationship to the cog on the inside of this wheel. And I'll need to use a magnifying glass to show you what happened to that little cog. If you look very carefully at the top there, there's a little black line. What happened was that cog had split and was no longer attached to that shaft properly. Possibly via this angle you can see the black line of the split running through that cog. So you're all asking, well Leo, show us how you fixed it and attached it back on. Well, let me give you a demo. Well, if you can imagine, this is the shaft. I slid the cog off and I went in and I gave it a bit of a rough up. I just gave the shaft a rough surface so the gear had something to adhere to once I glued it back on. I cleaned all the parts to be glued with acetone, and acetone is definitely something you need your parents to be playing with. It's certainly not stuff for children. I'll be using super glue to adhere the nylon onto the steel shaft, keep out of reach of children. And in what is a simulation of the real deal, this is what I did. That's a different gear of course, but remember it's a simulation. And the trick is not to use too much super glue. That little nylon piece has glued onto that shaft beautifully. So there's a little story of how I fixed the cog back onto the shaft and got this toy up and running again. Okay, so here I am, hopefully putting it back together all in the right place. I'll certainly soon find out when I put it together and turn it on. But before I closed it up, I gave it a spray of something. I gave the insides a bit of a spray with silicone spray lubricant. And in reading the blah blah on the back of the can, it seems like you can put it on just about anything. And hopefully without making a fool of myself, this little caboose works. Another thing I noticed was make sure the traction tyres are firmly seated and locked onto these wheels. One of the units that I got had a free spinning traction tyre, and if it's free spinning, it's not giving you any traction. Well, I hope I've given you some insight into what can go wrong with these little power units. And it's a bit of an unusual toy because once this power unit goes and stops working properly, all the fun of the toy diminishes as well. And hopefully I've shown you that they're not that complex inside and can be easily fixed. You're probably wondering why was I stuffing around with that little toy? It's because I did a comparison between a real Tommy playset and a knockoff, a clone, a faker, a copy. If you're at all curious about the differences between these two, I did an elaborate video which explains all. In a world where we see China literally cloning everything and anything, it may well be worth your while understanding how these toys are knocked up. Pretty soon we'll have a population of people who will not understand what it's like not to have a cloned or copied item in their possession. And we'll have to ask ourselves, is this really what we want? Thank you for watching the video. Bye for now.